Welcome to the Red Room Podcast. Today we have a special guest, David Bushman, who is a television curator from the Paley Center in New York City. Our first question is, what is a television curator?
The job has evolved over time. I've been here for 20 years, but the job has evolved over the years as the identity of the institution has evolved. But some things that have remained consistent is I help build our library. We have 150,000 programs going back to the earliest days of television right up until probably what was on TV last week. And the other main component of it is basically organizing screening series or panel discussions and sometimes moderating those discussions. I contribute a lot to our website. I do a lot of writing. Those would be my major responsibilities.
That sounds like a great job.
Yeah, it's a very nice job.
The very first time I went to New York City, it was, I believe, 2000 or 2001, and I stumbled upon the Museum of Television, and that's where you work, right? Is that the Paley Center, or is that something that's different?
Originally, we were called the Museum of Broadcasting when we opened in 75, and then we were subsequently changed to the Museum of Television and Radio because obviously broadcasting was no longer the whole game, but probably when you stumbled upon us, we were called the Museum of Television and Radio. And then since then, we've had our name changed to really reflect the impact of new media and to the Paley Center for Media.
If I went today, would all that be on a computer screen and it just comes up digitally?
It would, yes.
That is awesome. So what to you is like your prized possession? Did you uncover something that was really important that's like your Hope Diamond?
We found the first Super Bowl, which was a huge surprise, something that everyone had considered lost. And it was not in good shape. But institutionally speaking, that would be a jewel. One thing that's missing to this day, although we do have the audio version of Carson's First Tonight, the video is missing. There's still things out there that we haven't gotten. There's this old Woody Allen scripted sitcom from the early 60s that he created. One thing about this job that's changed, there's so much that we used to have that you just couldn't get anywhere else. So this thing that Woody Allen wrote called, I think, The Laugh Makers is now, you can find it on eBay or iOffer or sell.com or whatever. It's out there among collectors, but it's still rare. And something like that is just, because I've followed his career, is such a joy for me to know that we have the opportunity to present that for people to see. The answer to that question for me would be different than from the answer that the institution would give you.
So right now, could I go on the internet and access your database and watch that Picket Fences Roundtable?
That's something that you can't do, and there's a variety of reasons for that, which are pretty boring to talk about.
It's the lawyers that stop that from happening.
Not without good reason. We don't have rights. Let's just take an episode of Picket Fences as opposed to the Roundtable. The episode we have no rights to, other than for use within these four walls. We are a nonprofit institution that's basically supported by the industry, by the networks and the production companies and the new media companies and so on. So they're happy to give us stuff to use here. But once you talk about external exploitation, then it becomes another matter. And that's something that we hope to negotiate someday, but it's not happening. In terms of the panels, and you call them roundtables, we look for other ways to exploit those ourselves because we're not out to make a profit, but I like to have my salary paid, and basically we need to have an operating budget to fund that. If you were to buy the complete series of anything, like say Twin Peaks, there's a possibility that you will find attached to that as an extra a panel that we did with, in this case it would have been Mark Frost and a couple of the other people on that show back when it was first premiered. So we look for ways to exploit those things so we can continue to operate.
Like Deadwood has that on there, the Deadwood series.
Yeah, a lot of series do, including Deadwood.
And to me, those are the best extras. Every time, hands down, that panel is the most valuable piece of extra on those discs.
That's very kind of you to say. Thank you.
That's just the truth. So earlier this week, I watched on Hulu the Newsroom one that they did in L.A. So how did that work? Because that obviously is something that we could view. Is that something that you guys worked out with Hulu and it'll only be up there for a month or two, or will that always be on Hulu?
It used to be called our annual television festival. Now it's called Paley Fest. And it now has sponsors, and Hulu is one of them. So Hulu negotiates certain rights to put them up on their site. Something that we did new this year was, do you guys go to the movies? You ever see those cinema commercials for Fathom events? So this year we did a couple of panels at our Paley Fest. The Big Bang Theory actually was in theaters across the country live, and The Walking Dead was tape delayed a week. We're always looking for things to do like that.
Scott and I have been going to the Star Trek The Next Generation Fathom events. We would love to see something.
How was that?
Oh, they're amazing.
Are you a Star Trek The Next Generation fan?
I'm one of the few baby boomers who prefers The Next Generation over the original. I'm a huge fan, yes.
Yeah, that just means that you're intelligent. That's all. It doesn't have anything to do with age. But I really suggest you checking out one of those Phantom events for Star Trek. Josh and I are having so much fun. And even though we've seen the episodes a billion times, it's completely different on the big screen as a communal event.
When you say that I check one out, are these things ongoing? I thought they just did them to celebrate, like, the 25th anniversary? I thought they timed it to that.
So they're timing it to the releases of the seasons on Blu-ray. And with the third season, they're actually doing something a little different. They're showing both episodes of The Best of Both Worlds, obviously one of the greatest seasonal cliffhangers ever, but they're stitching them together into one movie, and they're presenting that on the big screen in pure high-def redefinition. It'll be amazing.
Yeah, that sounds great. They had a panel with one of them, too, didn't they?
Yep, the second season, yeah. It was great.
And they have pretty close to 100% participation in that?
Yeah, I believe they did.
It was everyone.
Yeah, even Wesley was there, everyone.
Yeah, that's great. I should check one of those out.
The first time we went for season 1, which is, I'm sure, the worst season of Star Trek The Next Generation, but there were people standing along the aisles. Yeah. That's how many people were there in Columbus.
I bet 500 people were in this theater, just packed. Second time, not so many, but really, it was very heartening to see that many people still loving a 25-year-old show.
That is heartening, and that's good ammunition for me to have here for when the next time I go to people here and want to do something with Star Trek. We did back around the time of the anniversary, which I guess was September, we did a screening here for a month. We called a Star Trek mixtape, which was something that I put together where it was very cheeky, but I compared the original Star Trek with, I called it Dueling Star Treks. And I started, my opening argument was that here's 10 reasons why The Next Generation is better than the original series. And then I would have all these little bubble points, and then I would show clips. I love the show like you guys, and if there's opportunities for me to do something with it, I would want to do that.
So, staying on Star Trek just because we love it, what are some of the episodes that you think really stand out in the Next Generation canon?
Obviously, I love the Borg episodes. We did a poll where we took a vote on what people considered. I think we put up like 10 or 15. I actually am one of the few people, I think, who actually enjoyed Tasha Yar. Did you guys like Tasha Yar?
I liked her, yeah.
I think yesterday's Enterprise, I would say, is probably one of my favorite episodes, where she's got to make a decision about whether or not to go on the other ship. Inner Light?
Scott hates that episode. I love it.
I was setting you up there because I wondered if you would pick Inner Light. This is a fun, ongoing argument that we have on the podcast. I actually think Inner Light is one of the worst Next Generation episodes ever.
I disagree completely. I think it's amazing.
It typically turns up high in the votes.
It always does.
I love the episode with the time loop where Data plants the number.
Yeah. Cause and effect.
Cause and effect. I love that episode. You, of course, see that happen later on with, like, Battlestar Galactica and so on. Those are some of my favorites.
Perfect segue, because in one of your latest blogs, you talked about the best series finales, and you didn't rate Battlestar very high, and that gave Scott and I very big pains in our hearts. So we have to have you justify that statement. How is Battlestar not a great ending?
First of all, you are literally the first people I have spoken to who liked that finale. I don't know anybody other than you guys who liked the last episode. To me, that was so much something that didn't reflect to me that they had a vision all along where the show was going. You guys tell me what the deal was with Starbuck disappearing. Tell me that.
Okay, I have a question. Do you like the pilot of Battlestar Galactica?
The miniseries?
Yes.
Of course.
So if you like the beginning of Battlestar, then you love Gaius and Six. and you buy the concept that Gaius can see 6. Therefore, you have to buy the concept that everyone can see Starbuck.
At the end of it is a big middle finger to religion. It's a mass delusion. So you have a whole group of people that are religiously fervent that have a mass delusion that's centered around this person leading them to the promised land. And in the beginning, they didn't believe Starbuck, and eventually they ended up following her, and they found Earth. So it's almost like a two-sided coin there, and then, of course, she just disappears, as many religious idols tend to do. I was blown away by the ending of Battlestar, but I watched it 2 years after it aired, so I had some decompression time there.
You rewatched it, or you watched it for the first time?
I didn't watch it until the whole series came out on Blu-ray.
Okay.
And I actually watched it when it was on. Now, I will say that Battlestar is a very flawed show. I think after season 3.5, it really struggles. It has some of the worst episodes of television ever. But I think the first 2 seasons, and to me the end, really do work. Very interesting. Also,
yeah, I think the whole thing with the Final 5 silence was hugely problematic. I think they even admitted that they didn't know what they were doing until they came to it. But I would love to see a show, especially now where we know that endings are such a big deal for these shows that have these passionate fan bases. Know where you're going at the end from the beginning. There's a scene even in the final episode of Galactica where there's a flashback. I think it's between Sharon and Adama. And to me, where's the emotional resonance in flashing back to the scene that we never saw before? Even this thing with Starbuck disappearing, where was the emotional resonance there? That whole relationship between Adama and Rosalind, and then picking up and leaving and flying away with Rosalind so she could die in his arms or whatever. Was that Galactica, or was Galactica about Lee finding a way to wipe out the entire Cylon race, and Rosalind and Adama having that argument, and Hero preventing it from happening? That was it. Like, that whole last episode just didn't cut it for me at all.
Interesting.
Boy, we have so much to talk about. This is killing me. There's 7 ways to go.
I'll talk about House of Cards with you. I cannot understand where the praise is coming from for that show. That show, although finally at the end, I finally got into it, but how is it that this guy is fooling everybody in Washington, a town that is filled with sharks and smart people? They may not be principled people, but they're savvy people. Mm-hmm. He is fooling every single one of them with the most blatantly obvious schemes, including probably the one person in Washington who has to be the biggest shark of all, which is the chief of staff to the President of the United States. That woman is a complete idiot.
Yeah, compared to Leo in West Wing, she's awful.
Anyway, that's my problem with that show. That is the most dramatically facile show I've ever seen in my life. And plus, let's face it, you guys cannot tell me that Kevin Spacey doesn't drop his accent for 50%. For a while, I started to think, okay, maybe the accent's not that real to begin with, and maybe he just turns it on at certain times for charm or whatever. But that's not the case. There's no logic or consistency to when he uses his accent or when he doesn't. Try to find that for me.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
I will admit that in the pilot of House of Cards, I struggled greatly with his accent. Not so much as an acting point of view, but just because I didn't buy him as a good old Southerner. I think they should have made him from Maine.
Drop the accent.
It would have been a better choice, but sometimes you gotta take what the writer gives you and believe in it. This is why we love television. Look at us arguing over these characters and the choices they make. I don't think that happens in a movie. And that's why I love television way more than a movie. Because we can really battle about what we think about. Yeah. So you put The Sopranos as the #1 finale. So why did you do that?
I just think it was extremely provocative and just consistent with the best elements of the show, which was it just was extremely thought-provoking and underplayed. And I completely buy into the argument that it doesn't matter whether he died or not, because he's going to be living the rest of his life with this anxiety, about looking over his shoulder. And the anxiety was what the show was about. And the whole big hook in the beginning was, here's this mafia guy who's born into the wrong time and having to deal with the dissipation of his power and authority, and so goes to a shrink and starts taking anti-anxiety pills. That to me is an example of somebody who may very well have had the ending in mind when he started because it made sense.
I never thought I would say this, but we actually agree with you. We just rewatched The Sopranos. We have a TV night with our wives, and we pick different shows, and we watch them. And Sopranos, we were just rewatching, and when I got to the end of season 1, the end of that episode is precisely the end of the finale. It's the same scene exactly. And I said, look at this finale works perfectly for the show because they did it at the beginning of season 1. No one should have been shocked by that ending.
Tell me what happened at the end of season 1.
So that was the episode, it's called I Dream of Jeannie Cusimano, where they all come in out of the rain into Artie's restaurant, and it ends with them at the table as a family. Of course, that anxiety is there. I think you're absolutely right about that. Scott made a comment that Sopranos was probably one of the biggest deceptions ever placed on the American TV watching audience, because we all watched it thinking that there was going to be this huge plot arc with an ending, and all that we're left with is that anxiety. It's at the heart of the whole show.
I agree with everything you just said. I think the fact that it didn't try to pay off in the way that you just said with that big arc and that big ending was thoroughly consistent with the strength of that show. And I think you're seeing the same thing. To me, by far, the best show on TV right now is Mad Men. I just think it's on a completely different level from everything else you're seeing. I love Breaking Bad. I'm sure there are other shows I could tell you that I love right now, but there's so much that they don't tell you in that show that you just gotta have to figure out for yourself. And it's just so nuanced and evocative.
Exactly what you just said right there is what divides the people who hate Mad Men from the ones who absolutely love it. It's a love or hate show. So I've been trying to convince Scott to watch it. I'm hoping that we're going to bowl him over to the other side eventually.
I actually haven't seen Mad Men, but I will say that I really don't like Breaking Bad. I don't want to go to television to watch the most awful thing happen every time. When I got to the middle of season 3 is when I gave up on Breaking Bad because I was like, oh, I know what's going to happen. The worst thing ever. And I like to watch television where I don't know what's going to happen. I want the writer to pull me and move me in a way. And Josh really likes to watch TV where maybe the worst is happening. And I want to go to the best if we Siskel and Ebert ourselves.
What show personifies that?
I would say Downton Abbey, where I don't always know where they're going. And it's not the most provocative show ever, but I like Carson. And I want to spend time with them. Boston Legal is a show that I really like. I'm a big David E. Kelley fan. I think he talks about society now, but he creates relationships between people that I want to spend time with. I think Twin Peaks is a show where you love Cooper and Harry. Next Generation is another one.
Well, I think Kelly believes in a certain innate human goodness, which certainly Star Trek would promote that as well. Are you a Friday Night Lights fan? And there's a certain belief in that human nature ultimately, that the goodness in human nature will ultimately triumph, and there's something inspirational about that. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
I'm in the middle of Friday Night Lights now. I'm watching it. It's one that Josh had me watch. I do Friday Night Lights so far, but I'm only in season 1. It's funny because I'm not a very positive person. So for you to say that I believe in the humanity of people really is hurting me. I don't think that's it. I think I want to escape to that and to the friendships of that. Like Sex and the City is a show that I really love, and I probably shouldn't, but it's because of those friendships. You really believe in it, and I think that's what I like. I like character. I don't know that I believe that Walter and Jesse are best friends, and I really want to see what they get into, and I know that's not the point of that show, but that's what I've learned in the shows that Josh has suggested to me to watch, because we go back and forth to cover.
Well, how about Lost, Scott?
I loved Lost, except I don't like the end of Lost. The last season didn't work for me. I think Lost should have ended at the end of season 5 when Jack was holding the nuclear bomb, and he said it was going to solve everything, and Sawyer said you're going to ruin everything. I think he should have dropped the bomb, and it should have said Lost, and that was the end of the show. Because then it's up to the viewer to decide.
Like for The Sopranos, I'm impressed by the specificity of your vision. And the reason I asked you about Lost is because I think that's what Lost was about. It was about a lot of things, but I think at its heart it was about I think it sold us on the characters, and that's why there's been so many lost imitations, and I think they don't work because you don't care about the characters the way maybe people love Jack, and apparently not many other than me, but or they hated him, but they felt strongly about him one way or the other.
You even love to hate the bad guy.
Yeah, I think there was a real bond with the characters, not just between the viewers and the characters, but also the relationship that these characters build up with each other over the course of time, because they relied on each other ultimately in so many ways. Even guys who didn't get along ultimately, like the time where Sawyer eventually would give up the medicine that he was hoarding. Those characters, for the most part, were basically good characters. That scene where it's a pretty melodramatic loss, I got to tell you guys, I was sobbing at the end of Lost.
Oh, yeah.
I just really thought that was a fantastic show.
For me, Lost was one of the first shows that it took the antagonist and then showed you a 360-degree view so that half a season later you're actually rooting for the guy you hated. And that was amazing to me, that you could really twist that. I think a lot of successful shows like The Walking Dead, like Breaking Bad, have done that as well, where you can see the other side of these characters, and they're human, they're rounded. And television, I don't think, before The Sopranos really went there.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I do think it was an evolutionary process, and I think that certainly David Kelly was a key person in bringing that along. I think you couldn't have had The Sopranos if you didn't have St. Elsewhere, or even though I was never a Hill Street Blues fan, I think you needed to have Hill Street Blues. And 30-something, I think television has evolved incrementally, and I think that it's important to not lose sight of shows that today may not look like they were as groundbreaking as they were, but they really did play an important role in terms of letting us get to where we are now. Walking Dead is another show that, to me, is just an incredibly interesting show. And that scene where they pass the backpacker twice, and then he goes back and picks up his, bloodied backpack after he ignored the guy's pleas for help twice, and then goes back and, like a vulture, goes back and gets the remains. To me, it's just amazing to me what they've done with that character of Rick. And to me, the irony is that here you are fighting for the survival of humankind, but in the process, you're losing sight of what humankind is. And that's like when he said to Herschel, would you risk the lives of your two daughters to save Michonne? That's not the right question. It's not about the two daughters. It's about preserving what's left of humanity in an extremely difficult time. And the fact that the hero of the show, like Walter, is evolving in such a way that just so interesting and unconventional for a hero is what makes this amazing.
I completely agree with you. And if I were academically inclined and going for my master's degree in sociology, I could easily take that and extrapolate it to how our congressman could care less about what happens with the banks and people losing their mortgages. What's best for the species and for the country. It's a total abandonment of that. I think that shows like that show that the best, and that's probably why I personally gravitate to those things, because I can see that and extrapolate up to the top.
It was The Sopranos, to your point, that basically changed the concept of the American hero, because I think that The Sopranos didn't really have a character with a moral core that you could admire. I don't think there was, at least not a lead character. And I think that was revolutionary. And I think you see that even in Mad Men. I'd be curious to hear your opinion about that. But would House of Cards be better if it had somebody in the center of it whose morality you could admire, and that therefore it had some sort of inspirational facet to it, which it doesn't have, because there is nobody. I don't want to simplify it and say that you have to have a good guy or something, because television is more interesting when you don't have to have a good guy. But are we missing something because we don't have that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I have an answer for both of those. To me, the moral center of House of Cards was actually Kevin Spacey's friend that he had the homosexual relationship with him back in school. And they gave us that one glimpse of humanity that he was open to, and that was his one true love. And from then, everything else was just a power grab. And in regards to Mad Men, I think it was Lloyd Price who hung himself in his office, and we saw what happened with that humanity in Mad Men, and it's a very sad story.
You know what? I think your point about House of Cards is a great point, and I actually think that was the best episode of the series. I guess you could say Lane may have had a moral core, but he didn't adhere to it. He did some pretty awful things, and I think the reason that he hung himself was because his life had just basically fallen apart, not out of any sense of moral outrage or anything like that. This was a guy who basically encouraged Joni to sleep with a client.
Yeah.
Maybe he felt guilty about it. Even Don may be evolving, but even Don had problems with Joni doing that. Lane is not a character that I would say was the moral core of that show.
I think that he went down the wrong path, and we watched a very rapid decline, which is basically going to be the decline of Dawn in the end. And to me, it's just like Tyrion telling his sister in Game of Thrones, your joy will turn to ashes in your mouth.
I love that show, and I've read all the books, but if you're looking for a moral core of that show, it's the Starks. And you can't exist in that universe if you're like Ned Stark, and of course Ned Stark did not. No. And that therefore Ned Stark is just stupid rather than somebody to admire. But I need that character.
All these shows that we're talking about is the same exact story. You absolutely cannot have somebody who's held up to this American ideal of the rugged individual who's good beyond measure, and that goodness can stand as a resolve against evil. You have to play the Game of Thrones. And when you do it, you either win or you die. That is Mad Men, that is Walking Dead, that is Breaking Bad. It's the same story, and we're really talking about the deconstruction of the American dream, the American ideal, to me. And it's one story.
I think it's a very insightful and great point. And my point is that I think that really started with The Sopranos.
I agree, wholeheartedly.
Yeah. Just this whole deconstruction of the American hero and the idea that that the old concept of heroism, you'd be crushed like Ned was, or like Lane was. It's interesting.
Very interesting.
You mentioned 30-something, and that is one of my all-time favorite shows. I think that the characters on that show, there's no character maybe on television ever that grew more than Nancy, from the pilot, who she has one line in, to breaking your heart throughout 4 years. Were you a 30-something fan back in the day?
I was a big-time 30-something fan. I drifted mostly toward Michael, but the stuff that was going on between Elliot and Nancy was unbelievably intense. And I guess, I think age-wise and everything was pretty similar emotionally to where Michael was, and it really spoke to me. But, yeah, I love the show.
Yeah, I also love Michael, and Josh and I have always talked about how 30-something, in a way, is a perfect show, because a man who watches 30-something is going to gravitate to the business. And before Mad Men, that was probably the best show, how much business matters to men. And shows don't normally do that. If you think about a normal show, the dad just goes to work or something. And it's not real, but your job defines you as a man more than your children do. When Michael and Elliot lose their business very early on in the show, it's one of the saddest things I've ever seen.
I've always wanted to put Matthew Weiner, Marshall Herskowitz, and Ed Zwick on stage together and just let them have a conversation.
I'm telling you right now, if you don't invite me and Josh to that, we're going to hunt your ass down, brother. Because we would love that.
That is an amazing idea.
All right, I'll keep that in mind. If I'm able to make it happen, you guys are invited. One of the shows that has always stuck in my head, I don't know if you guys have watched My So-Called Life, there's a scene in the pilot where Angela's talking to somebody, and I guess the conversation ends, and they follow Andrew away. And as the camera follows her, they pass a girl in the corner of the hallway who has nothing to do with the show, nothing to do with the episode. But she's standing up, and she starts crying and slumps down against the floor. And that character never appears again. She never has a word of dialogue. If you were reading the newspaper or something, you didn't see it. But to me, that's an amazing encapsulation of the emotional trauma of high school. And it was so subtle, not calling attention to itself. Again, if you weren't paying attention, you didn't see it. It was never explained. And so you had to have these kinds of shows along the way in order to get where we are now. And I think one of the things that we do here is try to make sure people don't lose sight of that.
I love that you mentioned reading the newspaper, which is now replaced with accessing your phone. That is one of my big pet peeves. Our first show that we ever watched on TV Night was Twin Peaks. Josh and his wife had never seen it. When I showed them Twin Peaks, I said, listen, the phones go away, the lights go out, because Twin Peaks is a show that you could be doing something else and you'll get who killed Laura Palmer. You'll find out who did it. But if your eyes are not looking at the fan spinning or the water dripping outside of Leo's shack, You're missing Twin Peaks. You have to sit down and watch television, and that's the only kind of television I want to watch, that I have to pay attention.
I completely agree, and I think that was David Lynch's point, right? Yeah, I can tell you who killed Laura Palmer, but that's not the point of the show. It's exactly what you just said.
So how did you get involved in the essay book? Because we're in it, too. I didn't know you were in it.
Yeah, I wrote a chapter about the relationship between Cooper and Laura.
Ours is on Firewalk with Me. We really focused in on Laura's dream and how she gets put in a frame. I remember talking about that she gets put in a frame of art, and basically that's what the whole show is, that you are watching a frame of art. And to me, that's one of the most meta scenes ever, when she's in that art and she turns around to look at herself in the art. And I think we discuss a lot of the dual meanings of...
Yeah, that sounds great. I look forward to reading that. Mine was about all this duality in Lynch's work, and specifically Twin Peaks, but people don't usually talk about the duality between Palmer and Cooper. Here are these characters who are basically dreaming about each other before he never meets her, really.
I think we also talked about how the true hero is Laura, and a lot of people think Cooper is the hero of the show, but...
He failed.
Laura beat Bob, but Cooper doesn't.
Resisted Bob. I think the story with Cooper's not over, right? We all think that. And you know what? You can say that Cooper may not have beat Bob, but he did do something heroic in sacrificing himself for the woman he loved. I think that there's a certain heroism in that.
Do you think that Twin Peaks should come back in any form, or should we leave what we have alone?
I would take anything by David Lynch at this point. I would be thrilled. But I would like to see it come back. I think that if you put it in Lynch's hands, that he would find a way for us to be happy that it's not left alone. I think he's just such an amazing filmmaker and storyteller that I trust that if it's in the right hands, I think we would find it very satisfying.
So if it were to come back, this is a kind of a trick question. What's the better model, for it to come back on ABC or Netflix?
I would say not network television. It doesn't have to be Netflix. It could be AMC or HBO or whatever. But I would like to see him have as much creative freedom. I don't think he would abuse it in any way whatsoever.
What is your favorite Lynch movie? Besides Firewalk with Me, removing Twin Peaks from the equation.
Oh, okay. You guys like Firewalk with Me?
Oh, I love it. I actually prefer it to the series. I think it's a work of art.
Yeah, I'm with you. Again, that's one where I would say we're hugely in the minority. Certainly Mulholland Drive would be up there, and Blue Velvet would be up there, and Firewalk with Me would be up there if it were included.
David Lynch presented Mulholland Drive in the first 90 minutes to a network, and a network said, nah. So can network TV survive if, when they see something that goes on to be nominated for Best Picture, and they look at it and go, I don't get it. Can network TV survive?
There's still people watching it, and in bigger numbers than anything else. I don't know what's going to happen in terms of distribution platforms. I think that there's a real problem creatively with network TV now. Whether it's going to survive commercially and whether it's going to survive creatively are two different things. You like to think they'll come up with something, and they have in the past, where people will say, why were we even questioning it? And I'm not a fan of shows like Modern Family or whatever. There are people who look at that and say, wow, that's amazing TV that networks are doing. It depends really on the specifics of that question. Will it survive as a commercial, financially viable platform? Yeah, I guess that they're evolving all the time. They're making these deals. CBS just sold The Good Wife to Netflix. I think the bigger concern right now, particularly with one-hour drama, they are really struggling right now, and that's a problem. I've only seen a 60-minute version of the Mulholland Drive pilot. Is there a 90-minute version? I thought the pilot was basically the movie until she picks up that blue thing.
It is the pilot up until she picks up the blue thing, and also not having the front part where you see her with the grandparents. That part was newly filmed too. But I think that's definitely 90 minutes into the movie. It was a very long pilot. I read an article, and I'll see if I can find it. If I can, I'll send it to you. And I remember reading this back in the 2000s before, and it documents what happened to David Lynch and really points out the changes he makes and what they said. There's a shot early on where she's walking into the apartment building, and there's dog crap on the ground. David Lynch takes a shot of it. As far as ABC is concerned, there isn't dog crap in the world. We don't show dog crap. You have to cut that. And it's such a huge thing because she's coming to LA and the first thing she sees is a pile of shit. You know, that's what'd you hire David Lynch for? I've never seen it. I know it's out there, but I haven't ever watched it because they made him cut it down.
The way the critics treated David Lynch and Mark Frost for not solving Laura Palmer's murder at the end of the first season, shouldn't they realize by now that they were wrong to have done that? David Lynch, the guy is genius. Let him do it. He's smarter than you, smarter than me. He's smarter than any of these critics. Let him put his vision up there, and if you hated it, stop watching it. Reminding me of it when you were talking about the pressure that ABC put Lynch under, which is equally ridiculous. These people, they don't even belong in the same room with you.
I agree, and you had mentioned early on in this conversation about how when Lost came out, then everyone wanted to do a concept show. And what you want to do is you want to bring in a writer, you want to hear what their vision is, read a sampling of their writing, get who they are, and then leave them alone. If I hire Larry David to write something for me, whatever you do is great. You know it's going to be Larry David.
Joss Whedon.
Joss Whedon's a great example. What is someone canceling Firefly for? You'd seen Buffy. You'd seen Angel. You know who Joss Whedon is. And that's how shows should be created. Not by copying 8 million episodes of Friends or Lost or Breaking Bad or whatever. It's the writer.
And to get back to your network point, apparently it's the cable channels that are learning that lesson and doing exactly what you just said, but the networks just don't seem to. In the past, it's been this time of desperation where the networks have taken the chances, like with Twin Peaks or like with Homicide or St. Elsewhere. I think you're 100% right, and if you hear creators talk about what it's like to work for FX or HBO, that's exactly what they say, exactly what you just said, how they're hired and they're basically left alone to do their...
I think the fact that Aaron Sorkin, who has got to be one of the best writers there is on the planet, just as a writer, and the fact that he went to HBO and David E. Kelley's new show is on TNT, when you have all these, because he worked for Fox on The X-Files, when you have this bleeding of writers going away from you,
there's a problem. Rats run away. There's probably a fire somewhere. So, getting back to the network point, because I think this puts a bow on the whole discussion. To paraphrase Barack Obama, there are two Americas. And television used to be a place where we all came together, we watched the same thing, and we had a communal, democratic moment. And now there are two Americas. There are people watching the television that is speaking to our culture now, and then there are people watching the television that is under that commercial, non-democratic marketplace TV that you mentioned. So I do believe that institution is going to survive, but we're not talking about the same stories anymore.
It may survive for one America and not the other, which is fitting because we're becoming so much more polarized in every way. That it may either be a reflection of it or one of the causes of it, but yeah, it's true.
Thank you so much. This was a great conversation.
I really admire what you guys are doing, and it's fun to talk about TV with people who are clearly smart, passionate about it, and also I learned a lot because there were a lot of interesting thoughts being bounced around.
Same here.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. We've been doing this for about 1.5 years, and it's been so much fun to find other people who think of TV as art, which I really do.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Dave. We really appreciate your time and look forward to hopefully more conversations in the future.
Same here.
Yep.
Take
Bye-bye.
care, guys.